Good afternoon, good morning for some. Maybe tomorrow I'll have to say the same, and then it will be for sure good morning to some. For some practical announcements, there's no more sandwiches, you ate them all. You are with 334 registered people, which is insane. I'd like to thank you for all purchasing those tickets. Some of them really lost notice, where we had to call the caterer. A lot more sandwiches, please. But it's good, they're all finished. So thanks for that. Another practicality, so you know or might not know, there is a social night tonight. Who didn't know? So everyone got some emails, some spam from us. The social night will happen in Ray. It's in the center of the city. It's a really nice location. However, you need to have your badge. If you don't have your badge with you, you will not get the free drinks that we bought for you. Is that clear? Right, so I think it's really important you take your badge, or maybe your wallet if you want to support them. The event starts at 7:30. Maybe it will be open from 7:30. At 8 p.m. There's an open bar, and there's also a tour guide or a couple of tour guides that do a really short tour in the city center of Ghent. If you want to do that tour, just be present at the location at 8. There's another tour starting at 8:30. There's things like 25 people per tour guide. There's enough tour guides for most of you that have actually registered to attend. If you haven't registered to attend, please do so today before maybe 2 or 3 p.m. because then I can actually tell the location. There will be a lot more beer necessary and maybe also guides. Okay, there's 100 people of you that registered. From the 300, I assume that's more or less the ratio we counted on. But for those that haven't registered, I would really ask you to do so on the website. There's still time. So then, a couple of other announcements. This is the 10th edition of DrupalCamp. It seems that we're still going really strong. And we wanted to do something with all the financial help that we got in the last couple of years. So we usually do all these events, but we don't really have paid employees. It's all volunteer, and the money is piling up in our bank account, but we don't really know what to do with it, and that's not good for a non-profit, right? So now we actually want to announce that there is a job opening for 1 day every 2 weeks for a marketeer. Now, why is this important is that we want to promote the brand Drupal and also the technology Drupal from a non-company specific point of view. This is also important for the companies that are here because they then can actually say there is a non-biased entity that says that Drupal is out there, that it can compete with a whole lot of other systems, including some of the in-house built systems that some of you maybe also helped building or did in your student time. And we actually have a good use for that money then as well. Now, if you want to add or chip in into this fund, we'd like to ask the companies that are here to talk to Sven or myself or to Martin and see what kind of collaboration we actually can get together. Okay? So hopefully you appreciate that effort. I don't see anyone nodding no. If you're also interested in that job, that's fine, but we do prefer that you're a freelancer. We also really want to stay away from the bias of the bigger companies. Bigger, I mean, in the Drupal world, that's probably like 30 or 40 people or more. But that's the only requirement we have at this point. All right. So then I'd like to give a word to Marloes. Marloes is now an employee of Iemand Groen, but her story on how she got here is actually quite interesting, and I asked her to tell that story in front of this audience. I will leave the word to you now.
Thank you for the introduction. Hi. So 2 years ago, my life turned upside down. I went from care to core. So back then, I worked as a mentor for elderly with psychiatric problems, and I did this full time. In my spare time, I worked with Drupal, but since I only had the evening hours to do this, it was quite hard to find solutions to my problems. And I was afraid to ask questions on the Drupal.org forum. And if I found a solution, it was quite hard to place it in context because I didn't know the real ecosystem of Drupal. So my colleague back then, and my colleague now, Dirk, who's sitting over there, hi Dirk, thank you, motivated me to go to Drupal Camp Ghent 2016. And I doubted a lot. I was like, should I do this? Should I do this? So finally I just bought my ticket. And I came here on my own. And I met so many nice people. And they helped me. I went to the sprint room, and Martin took all the time to help me with these small issues and small questions that was so hard to find good answers for. And at the evening, at the social night, I also met Boris. Is Boris in the room? Not sure. And we had this really nice connection. And he gave me the opportunity to start as a junior developer at Limon Groen. And as you all can see, I still work there. And now, 2 years later, I got the opportunity to have another life-changing event at the Drupal Camp. Today at 4:20, I guess, yes, in this room, I will have my first conference session. And I hope to see you all then. Thank you.
Okay. We have the honor of introducing the keynote speaker, which is Danielle Jacobs. My name is Matthias. I am from Ozi. For those who don't know Ozi, we are a cool company that make great websites for amazing clients like Carrefour. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the organization. I want to say give a big hands up for everybody who's making this possible. Very short introduction about Danielle Jacobs. For those who don't know her, I think Danielle will introduce herself. With a very interesting fact. Danielle is IT Personality of the Year and developer of Liesbeta. So, clap your hands.
Can you hear me? Should be on. So, ladies and gentlemen, I must say I was a little bit surprised when at the beginning of this week when I was going to prepare this presentation, that I was reading through the program and that I was being announced as speaking about diversity. So, wow, I didn't know that. They asked me. I thought maybe if this is very diverse because I'm twice as old as you are. There are not that many women and ladies in the room. But the perspective I want to bring to you is that from the large companies, the IT decision makers of large companies, because that's what we stand for. So that will be my diversity role here. So not speaking about Drupal, but speaking about the wider community and the issues companies face on IT. So I have 3 parts in this presentation. So I present who I am so that you know what I say, where it comes from. I will say something about the priorities companies have on the IT and the digital part of their work, and of course some comments on what companies think when you speak about open source. So first of all, everything what I'm going to tell to you comes from what I hear by daily contacts with large companies. So we are an association, and as you just said, Nick, that you will have this person now going to work for your association. Very welcome to discuss how an association works. We have 20 years of experience in the meantime, so we can exchange experiences as you all do today and tomorrow. So we have 1,600 members, and they are all IT decision makers of large companies. So let's say 200 employees and more companies you all know, like Colruyt or BNP Paribas, and the industry, chemistry, a lot of public institutions as well, the European Commission. So that kind of companies, that kind of contacts, that's my background. So we have the 1,600 people. Yeah? That's much easier. Yeah, okay. Then I can walk around. It's a little bit more comfortable. So we have 1,600 members, 1,150 or something like that, because it changes every day, is this ICT decision makers, the people we are really targeting. And then the other parts are companies like Proximus or a one-person consultant. So that's a mixed audience, but people from the sector. We don't work for the people coming from the ICT business, although they are welcome to be in our events, but it's the decision makers we really want to work on. So who are these people? As I said, mainly large companies. So the 1,000, the blue part, is the companies with more than 1,000 employees. So you see, the smaller they are, the less they are involved with our association. The sectors, they are all well represented, so that's not very interesting. They come from everywhere. This is a little bit of the picture. What we do is we follow the demands we get from the businesses. So we want to help them, as you all do. It's really very comparable. People don't know anymore what to do. They know digital is very important, IT is very important. They should not be just a department in a company doing the operational stuff. They need to invent. They need to take care of the digital transformation. They need to come up with innovations. And so they are very unconfident on how do we do this. Everything changes so quickly. We work in a large company, so it's very difficult to change the approach of the company. And so they come to us to exchange experiences. The 4 levels of domain, innovation and ICT technology, that's the big picture, like blockchain on the innovation part, but ICT technology, so the #1 priority this year for them is IT architecture, because they do not know what to bring to the cloud, what not to bring to the cloud. Security, of course, very, very important. And I must say that when I was preparing this presentation and I was asking to companies, what about open source? What is your first reaction? Security came up quite a lot. Privacy, of course, everywhere. And everything about procurement, especially about software licensing, also very important if you compare that with the open source world. It's not for nothing that it's just one of the big 4 domains. We only do 3 main tasks. That's first of all, bring people together like you do today. Let them exchange experiences on whatever they ask. Do a lot of lobbying to the government. So we are a lot at Cabinet of Minister De Croo. We are a lot at BIPT, so the Belgian Institute for Electronic Communications. And we are a lot at the Privacy Commission, although we would like to have a new direction there because we have a lot of questions, but more on that to come. So exchange of experiences, be the voice of the business users, and then on the national and international part, because we are just working for Belgium, but we have what we call EuroCIO, where there are 13 national associations also in other European countries work together to go to the European Commission to be our voice. How do we work? We need to work on the priorities of our members, so it's very easy. We just do a survey. We had about 280 companies giving their priorities during summer, and so then we build up our whole action plan. We do about 40 activities every year, so just one a week. I'm not going to read all this for you. This is just to give you a little flavor of the subjects we are dealing with. But you will see that security is very important. If you just take the top 10 of the priorities, 6 out of those priorities were about security. So security, very, very important. The new parts like the blockchain, the future of machine learning, the AI part, the IoT part, all those kind of different technologies. Trust, important in this context when I come back to the remarks on Drupal later. So people say trust should be in the neighbor. So people are so scared right now about IT and the digital part. So everything about authentication, but also e-signature, e-archiving, all those kind of services. What about It's Me, the information, the solution from a couple of banks and telecoms operators? Can we use it in other countries, in other companies as well? But what is a very large part is that part, the licensing policies of the major vendors, the exit strategies for cloud contracts, and negotiating the contracts for IT, especially on cloud. So we really spend a lot of discussions on software licensing, where open source can be a good answer. As I said, we spend a lot of time at political cabinets. We also have discussions with major software suppliers. Until now, because we do not really live in an open world, it's mainly about Oracle, Microsoft, also Google, SAP will be on our agenda. Next week we have a meeting, Belgium challenges Oracle on the licensing again. Belgium challenges Microsoft on the licensing again. So you will see in a lot of the presentation that the licensing is really disturbing us a lot. So that about the picture where I come from. I just took two subjects out of it to give you a feeling of what we do and how companies look to technology. First of all, I took the privacy. Privacy is one of our main topics right now. We did a lot of work on it last year, as you probably all know. So on the 25th of May, we had the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. And so we helped companies to prepare themselves. I presume that in your workshops today and tomorrow, you have a lot of exchange to exchange ideas, to learn from each other. What we also want to do is help people that they don't need to reinvent the warm water or the wheel again all the time. So we made a lot of templates on just a PowerPoint that was in January 2016 already, that our people could give to their board, or a presentation they could give to their board, why privacy is important and why they should have budgets for it. Not everybody did something with it, which was a little bit a shame. The first months of 2018, when a lot of companies said, GDPR is there and the penalties are quite huge, so we have a problem. Another concern is the American approach. A lot of people are saying that GDPR is very difficult, and it is difficult, but the intention is good. The intention is to protect all our privacy and to have some attention that companies use your privacy in a good way. Now the difficulty is that it's a law, well, it's a regulation. It's about 80 pages plus hundreds of pages on extra guidance from the different data protection authorities. And of course, companies need to do something with it, and they want to implement that in their IT. But if you have interpretation and IT, that is not working together so good. So there is certainly a big issue. And then when it comes to the States, there is now the Cloud Act. The Cloud Act is just from 2018, so it's very recent. And so what they've done in the States is that they made a law just to deal with all the information their cloud providers do have from companies in the US, but also companies in other parts of the world, meaning Europe and other countries as well. Maybe you will recall a student, Schrems, who went a couple of years ago to the Court of Justice to say, I have a problem with all the information Facebook is keeping on me, so there were some consequences. There was a kind of agreement between the US and Europe to say, if you have data on European citizens, you can use what was used to called the safe harbor, so you can have your data stored in the US, but because of that decision of the courts, that was no longer possible. So they need to reinvent the solution. They are now calling it Privacy Shield, but it's not ready yet, and so they are discussing it for 2 years. So another difficulty, like you have to implement something in your IT, you have to do something in your Drupal developments, but the context is uncertain, and there is an incredible, huge amount of lobby going on. So next week, the person responsible for Microsoft Europe for the corporate affairs, so-called lobby, will be in Brussels, so just to discuss with the European Commission on how this can be dealt with. But 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting with, I think, 5 or 6 CIOs. They just in an informal discussion on their cloud strategy, how to go, and so. And they all came up with all these difficulties on where to store my data. Should I have the cloud provider dealing with my data in Europe, or is it not that important? Even if it's an American company and the data are located in Europe, are they going to be safe or not? And it's not only about privacy. It's not only about personal data. Yesterday evening, we had a discussion on how to deal with confident data. It was more in the context of information shared within boards. So it was very strange because a lot of people in the room just said, when it's board, it's just on paper. It's our board members are very old-fashioned. But it's not only about the confidential information about the figures of the company. It's also about, let's say you are having a merger and acquisition. So only a few people in the two companies that are discussing can be aware. Somebody from Audi was in the room. He said, but for us, it's the prototypes of the different cars that are coming. So they need to be protected. So there's so much going on, and it's much more about the personal data. So the privacy, the protection of data is a very important one. But last month I was in South Africa for a discussion from, with all kind of people. And we were having a discussion, a panel discussion on privacy. And so people were complaining, this GDPR, it's much too difficult, you need to do so much work for it, and it's hard, and then it doesn't bring us anything, it's just costs. And then some people from Africa said, but there are 17 countries in Africa where there is no law at all on privacy. So that means your doctor or your hospital, they just can sell your patient files to hospitals. That's not something you want, of course. So we know it's important. We also have, since just 2 months, the blockchain task force. So some companies came to us in February or March or so. Large companies, people from the business user side. So there was a banking company, the Federation of the Notaries was one of them. Also some public institutions, Colruyt was one of them. And they said, but every day we can go to 10 conferences on blockchain. But there is nowhere a kind of platform where companies can exchange just some peer practices, best practices on blockchain. Can you do this for us? I said, okay, we do. And so we just did one LinkedIn message and we sent an email to our members. That was during the summer, it was beginning of July. And in August we had 50 companies being a volunteer to, not being a volunteer, absolutely willing to be part of it. So we are starting it now. And why am I choosing this topic? Because when I looked this morning to what they are expecting, and they expect a lot, so I'm not going to read to all the expectations to you, but one of them is best practices on IT issues and how to avoid vendor lock-in. How do we come to open platforms? The importance of interoperability, promotion of open standards. We had a session on blockchain last month with a couple of companies just explaining what they are already doing, bringing their cases just to be an eye-opener for the people in the audience. And so the people in the audience were really not the people from the blockchain task force, because they are really people using blockchain and already having POCs or even real projects. But that event was kind of demystifying and just an eye-opener. That was the intention. And somebody from the European Commission was in the room asking to the person who was explaining a platform built on Ethereum, but what if it goes bankrupt? He said, but it's an open source. There's a community. Maybe it will not grow anymore, but there's no possibility that the platform is not there tomorrow. So everything is so nicely linked together. So to give some messages to you, what I've done is the last weeks when I met people, I just asked them, I have to speak about this Drupal bootcamp, and they will say that Dries Buiter should have been here, so it's quite difficult. Can you say something, just not a long discussion, but open source, does it ring a bell to you? What is your first feeling or your first reaction? And so what I'm going to say is not my opinion, it's not a Belgic position or so. It's just some comments people make on what they feel open source means for them, as you know, coming from large companies. So as I said before, software licensing is a very, very difficult issue for us. So we see that people are really struggling with it. And of course, they would like to get rid of the difficulties they face. Just today, well, actually yesterday, there's a large article on Microsoft and how they are now pushing their customers to the cloud and changing licensing models, changing the prices also. And so people do feel very bad about it. And it's just an example of Microsoft. It could have been another platform as well. But we organized, as I mentioned in the subjects we showed, so software licensing is very important, and also how to prepare for your exit. Because when people, they need to move to the cloud, even if they don't want to. Every SAP, Oracle, all these large vendors being very important in the different large companies in Belgium, they just push you, and there will be some software will not even be available in on-premise. So we had on Wednesday a discussion with about 20 companies, really large companies like Carrefour and Brussels Airport and so that kind of companies, on how to prepare for an exit. And it was incredible, the difficulty they faced, the contractual clauses they all put in. And so I said, well, it would be much easier in a world where all this licensing would not be there. I'm not going to read this for you, but this is a fragment I found from the ministry in Israel, of the Ministry of Finance. have said that if they would move to the cloud for Microsoft, it would cost some extra 50 million euro. It's just a concrete example because it's very difficult for me to give price examples from our own members, as they are all asking to keep it confident. But we had quite some members saying, oh, now the changes of the prices, it means that we pay maybe, depending on the size of the company, but 50,000 euro more, just like this, or a million euro more, just like this. And so when we started all this licensing stuff, that was on the demand of our members 5 years ago, and that was because there were very aggressive software audits. So companies just come to you and say, okay, we want to see what kind of software licensing you use. And we will check what you pay, and we will check what we find. And if it's not okay, you will have a very serious fine, or you need to pay extra. So what we've done then is we made a code of conduct. We made a list. It's only 3 pages or so. It's very short. But just common sense, like in the case you have a software audit, who will pay for the costs? Please do not put links to terms and conditions just in a URL in the contract, because then you don't know what you're dealing with. We went to the country managers of Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, and IBM, and some others, and they said, that's very nice. We agree with what you're asking, but we're just Belgium. We cannot change everything. So it would be nice that people could go more to open source. Now, first of all, so the reaction was, okay, it's free. That's the first expectation. But what about support? So again, large companies, they are a little bit scared about how this, if you introduce that open source in your company. So they are looking for serious parties. And what we've seen also on other domains, in the business world right now, is that there's quite an unbalance, and it would be nice to have some feedback from you after this session, between what the large companies want, and they come to with serious contracts and a very large desires or a wish list. And I think for smaller companies, or even for people developing, it's very difficult to work with them. But so on support, so they say we absolutely need a good serious party. And what about software support on time? You depend on the community, and I must say Drupal was mentioned quite a lot in a very positive way. So for Drupal it works well, but for a lot of other softwares, maybe the community is not that active. What about customization, and what about support on that customization? So there's some scary thoughts about it as well. And it's very difficult for a company to follow everything what is happening, let's say, in the Drupal community as an example, because there's not only the framework, you have all these new developments, why you are here, and you will have a lot of ideas afterwards to develop as well. So these are the first concerns I have to see. Yeah, okay. A big problem, a big issue, and probably also for you right now, is that the skills are not available. So people are really looking for IT skills in companies, on security, but also on other levels. We had a meeting last week on e-skills with the European Commission, where different presentations were made on what the market is offering and what the market what the market needs are. And there's a very big gap, and it will only get larger. And the difficulty our companies mainly face is that people are the good people, the ones who are really interested in development, in learning all the time. They would like to go to a specialized company, let's say to a security company if it's somebody working on security. So the competences in companies is a very big issue. And so on the open source, they are also a little bit scared, like, then I need to follow all up on this, and it changes so much, so how should we do that? But there was a very nice comment. I really wanted, I just put it in Dutch because that's the way that person just mentioned it. He said, well, it would be very difficult for our company right now to have the skills and to follow everything what is happening on Drupal on AWS. But then I'm just going to read it in Dutch. Ik zou in zo'n geval geen schrik hebben om van een vendor login of schrik hebben om mijn data naar ergens anders te smijten, gewoon omdat het allemaal heel open is. And I think people are moving there because when we asked, as I said, we do every year in the summer, we do this survey on what are your priorities. Open source was never there, and now it comes every time it goes higher in the ranking because people are really frustrated about the vendor logins. As I said, so positive comments came mainly on Drupal, so that was really that was a nice surprise. A lot of questions on what will happen with Red Hat, as this has been bought now by IBM. They paid really a lot of money for it, so they are not just doing that for fun. So we'll see what kind of business they will make out of it. So it's also something people say, like, open source, free is not free, especially not in a business environment. Now the main part is about security. So the main reactions, and I really would like to share this with you, because I think if you go to customers, or if in your work, or it would be good to be prepared for those kind of issues. So the main reactions came on security. So they said, okay, the framework is there, but there are so many people involved with the developments, and how can we make sure that that security will be everywhere? Somebody even gave some information. There was a hyperlink with it, but I did not copy it here. Some of the open source is very wide, and the supply chain, so the use modules, blah, 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 are very wide. And some have already been identified as, it was in Dutch, so I saw that I made a mistake there, that have been identified as being from the Chinese government. So it gives them a little feeling of being on not so under ease. So should we screen all the code? Is that possible? Is there bad code in there? But then they don't have the competences to do so. So it's a difficult part for them. But as a positive conclusion, I'm really quite convinced that, well, I don't have to convince you because you're more convinced than I am, that open source is absolutely here to stay. And I really think it's very good that you're all here, that you can learn from each other, that you can have ideas, not just to try these ideas, but to really bring them into solutions, because then our members can have more possibilities to use in their daily concerns. And with that, I really would like to conclude and have a good extra day, and especially also tomorrow. So thank you. Sure. Yeah. Sorry.